All right, we are here with Red Gerard. My name is Eddie Wall. I'm joined by Hava Fernandez and Pat Moore. We're going to do a little interview here with Red and discuss all things snowboarding. First off, Red, you've been riding a similar board for years and years before moving over to Arbor. What was it like switching over to a new board and also, designing your new board?
Yeah, for sure. I have been riding the same board basically, for my whole snowboarding career, and I was never too particular about it. I just kind of rode whatever I got, and I've always liked stiff boards, but other than that, that was my only thing that I was really searching for in a snowboard. So, when I came over to Arbor, I like it was really cool for me to actually understand and take more information in about like what kind of snowboard I want to be riding, whether that's a rocker or a camber snowboard, and do I want it super light or do I want it heavier? And there's like so many things that go into it that I learned that that makes a snowboard, and it was really cool for me to like learn all about that. But I can't really. It was so easy for me to switch over. The guys, Garrett and Dan, they have all their specs so dialed, and they kind of asked me what I would like to see in a snowboard, and we got it right on the first tee. So I rode that all season long, and yeah, I mean it was the best board I've ridden.
That's awesome. Do you have any specific experiences riding this board that you can share? Like any standout days this past season riding the board, or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I not to be like cocky or whatever. I had I think personally my best season of my career this year. I was able to find a lot of podiums, and I was able to like I had one goal going into this season. It was to try to make the early qualification for the Olympics coming up, and I was lucky enough to be able to do that. So, the whole everything was kind of a standout for me. It was a different year for me. I usually don't compete as much as I did this year. I usually kind of call it quits on competing after X Games in February, but kind of had to ride out the whole season this year. So, it was really cool to go back to back at X Games this year in slopestyle and win gold, and I think that would have to be like one of the biggest standouts for me. I think there's like so much that I don't even know if this is a real thing, but in my head it is. When you make a move from company to company, people are like, "Oh, is he going to be able to ride the same and do all that?" And to go back to back at X Games, I felt like in my head it just like made me settle well, where I'm like, you know what, this is it. I'm happy where I'm at, and I'm psyched to be riding an Arbor board, and and it rides great. And also, Ryan McDermott says it's got one of the fastest bases around. So he's a great wax tech.
What is the best feeling you've ever had on a snowboard?
Oh smokes! I mean, there's no better feeling than like when you learn a new trick, especially one that's like just been on the top of your head for a while, and it's like scary, and it just kind of comes down to the point where you're like, okay, I either slam here or I land, and like riding away from a trick, and you're like, I have no clue what just happened, but I'm somehow on my feet, and okay. So that's like a top one for me. And then, I think the other one that's pretty relatable, but like when you kind of like do a pretty good gnarly trick in the backcountry, like on a pretty decent sized jump, and you land it, and you're like, oh, that was definitely a clip. It doesn't really get too much better than that, because you can go on such, as you guys know, you go on so many days where you're like, we're 5 days out, 0 clips, and then you get that one, and you're like, that's nice to know that will for sure be a maker.
What is your favorite snowboarding sound?
I think favorite snowboarding sound, just because that's like such an interesting one. I like when you're like locked into a pretty long rail, and you can kind of hear it board side, like that's kind of reminds me of like the old snowboard games, when you lock on it. Like when you hear that, there's certain rails, like X Games for some reason, they have really like loud rails, it feels like. And I think that's a great sound. Greasing a rail, it's a pretty good sound.
I know that you were pretty adamant about doing a kid's board to match your pro model board. Like I'm just curious, I'm genuinely curious, like what is your reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. Yeah, like for me, it was like when I was growing up, it's just so hard it was always hard to find a good performance snowboard in general. And then when you did find it, it always had like some monster or something on the bottom, something that you like did not really want to run. And, like every single kid wants to act like one of the pros and wants to ride what the pros are riding. So it's like, and I used to do it all the time. I used to order stuff that was way too big for me because I wanted to ride a men's snowboard. So I'm like, that was kind of my idea behind it, is like, I don't want to make like a kid's snowboard that's going to have, the Cookie Monster on it. Why not just make it the same thing that the men ride? And that was just based off my personal experience with like kids boards.
When you are no longer in like an Olympic run, Red, and you have more time to get out in the backcountry and kind of do your thing out and go ride powder and hit jumps and stuff, do you think that this will still be the board that you'll want to ride to do that? Or will you want to look for like a different directional shape or something?
I've kind of always been, I think that this board should stay around, whether or not it's my pro model or whatever. But I've always been a really big fan of like riding other people's pro model. I don't really know. I mean, I would love to maybe look at like designing another board with, a Gerard or someone like that. But, I've always been a pretty big fan of like riding other people's pro models. So, when that time comes of like getting out of contest and, riding more backcountry, I think that I would probably just go to Gerard's board and ride that. And that was kind of my plan this season. I was hoping to get in the backcountry more, and I think I only did like 3 or 4 days, and that was the board of choice for sure.